Almost. Peace, sovereigns. Greetings. If you are joining us and you are in the space, the live space, the sovereign space, just let me know in the chat that you are here. I can't see everyone, but that's all right. All right, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. We are a couple seconds behind, 20 seconds if I'm not mistaken. I'm using StreamYard, so that's what happens. But we are here. So we're continuing with the conversation and the topics around, getting out of the stuck, right? Getting out of the muck when it comes to health and wellness. And so, one of the important things that I really wanted us to touch on, before the nice weather kind of just disappears. It's already cool already, but it's really important. This is a good shift in season to actually bring forward the necessity of shifting and changing and upgrading ourselves, right? Body, mind, spirit, everything, right? Everything. So to the sovereigns that are in the space, I want to pause and greet you all before I just jump in because I have a lot to say today. And I'm going to actually ask you all and charge you all to share too, because I know this is not, this particular topic is literally, I think it resonates with everyone else, right? I'm pretty sure it does with your current life now, but also with the way we were all reared, right? So I want to welcome Brother Antonio Smith into the space, and thank you. Greetings to you as well. And thank you for letting me know that I can be seen and heard. Awesome. Greetings to Sister Karen Mother Sill. Peace. So I don't know how much of about Karen that Karen wants me to share, but I've known Karen for a long time and was actually introduced to the raw vegan life through Karen. So, I always give thanks for those in my I have a little bio that I wrote up about just my journey, and I always say I'm not the person who will say like I arrived here or have knowledge off of my own accord, right? Always talk about those who have paused in their journey to share, right? And to give me morsels and like buffets of knowledge that will wisen me up, and I applied them and I can share my understanding with you all. So we're going to smoothly move into a topic today. Greetings, Sister Naya. Thank you for jumping in. We are taking a look at the way our cultural habits and lifestyles have created a culture of cholesterol. And that particular culture perpetuates ailments and heart disease. And, maybe you don't realize it because maybe no one ever shared this. We are wired to actually, live a life that reduces LDL or reduces buildup, fatty tissue buildup in our arteries and so on, right? And the blocking of it's built within us. Can you imagine that? It's in your DNA, right? There are mutations that occur within our bodies as African Americans, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's just really important to pay attention to, again, how we seamlessly move into taking on traditional ways of eating and being and thinking, and those affect us, right? And I think it's really important to pay attention to how the ways we eat and the way we think are, very much connected, right? It's almost like I've heard this so many times before. The way you do one thing is the way you do all things, right? And Chief Yuya has always said, like, if there's always that one issue that you have, and it's pervasive in all areas of your life. So, if you pick up one rock in your life, and you uncover an issue, then we bet your bottom dollar that issue is in all the other rocks in your journey. So hey, just Yeah, pay attention to that, right? So, and I'm not here to demonize cholesterol either, because here's the trick. The way they talk about cholesterol, the way we talk about cholesterol all the time, I think sometimes we've convinced ourselves that cholesterol is like the demon. It is the bad thing. That's not true. Our bodies actually need cholesterol. It's we can't survive off of it without it. But the body actually produces all of the cholesterol that it needs, right? It produces sufficient amounts of cholesterol for it to survive. We don't need to add, not necessarily. All right. So let me put all of my bleeps and blurps on pause for now. Greetings, top tier speakers. Welcome, 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 welcome. All right. So yeah, the idea of talking about cholesterol is not to demonize it. It is necessary. All right. However, once we begin to settle into a conventional diet, right? And a conventional diet is kind of like the SAD diet, right? What is considered the American diet, right? And a fat heavy diet. So, your focus is not necessarily plant, but you're focused on meats and veal and all the different types of meats. There are particular diets, some are keto, some are not, that really focus on, the meat. And that's a problem, because fatty meat tissue will lead to like just increasing levels of cholesterol and LDL. And I'll talk about what LDL actually is a little bit in a few. All right. A couple other types of diets that rely heavily on rich, creamy dairy products, right? Or even eggs. And I talked about the meats before. And seafood diets that lean heavily on things like lobster and other things that we should not be eating, by the way. Let me just make a box, a bulletin board to put that notice on, right? Shouldn't be eating it, but I'm not here to point a finger at you. I am here to say this is the truth, right? These are the facts, and these are truths, right? So they're two, right? Because they're not the same, and you have to weigh those and apply, so that way you could see a benefit in your journey and in your life, right? So, and I said seafoods because like there seems to be a whole culture around, eating lobsters and seafood, and I'm not, kicking it. I'm not demonizing it, but it becomes something that is just, a desire, right? And it is not particularly because anyone identifies like, okay, eating seafood is going to give me these nutrients. I think it becomes just a bandwagon everybody jumps on. It feels good, it looks good. It's just people want to pose with pictures of these piles of seafood and crab and everything on their tables, and that becomes like a trophy, right? It becomes something desirable. So pay attention to what, the rest of the world puts in front of you and says is desirable, without, and then you take it on without questioning why, right? Now, every time we mention, or you hear the mention of cholesterol, you probably have heard of LDL. So LDL just means low density lipoproteins. And those are found in the fats that we consume and the fats that we pour onto our food. And I use the word pour onto our food specifically and strategically because, when we start shifting into a plant-based diet, what you will find is that different types of fats creep into the diet and the lifestyle very easily, right? And, I'll pause here just to say, in steps, the treats that even I, as someone who focuses on raw and high raw, you see the treats that are created, the things that we call pies and cheesecakes and so on. And I know how to make them, and I make them. I've done demos for you all as well. But the problem with them is they become the source of a lot of the stroke and diseases that we find in people who also consume a sad diet. Because instead of going for what is considered a whole foods plant-based diet, we go for just what tastes good, just what actually alternatives to what we used to eat, right? We want everything to look the same. We want it to taste the same. If we used to eat cheesecake before, we want cheesecake now that we shifted our diets and we're selecting healthier choices. The truth is that it's not going to happen, right? As we learned in gluten, your hidden nemesis, is going to come back to bite you. It's going to get retribution. It's going to come back for you. Watch. So be careful. Brother, greetings. I greeted top tier speakers already. I forgot. Brother Antonio says, I remember growing up, there was an idea of status attached to lobster and shrimp as a delicacy. Gateway foods. Yeah. Yes, they are gateway foods. I like that term. Gateway foods. Yes, definitely. It was considered culturally a representation of a family's status in society, that you were able to afford or to buy or purchase these foods. But I will say this, I actually, the podcast doesn't air for probably another week, and I'll share it with you all. I'll share the link and so on. But I actually, I showed up. I was a guest on Food is Culture, which is a particular podcast, and we talked about the idea of sharing foods in the Caribbean, right? In the Caribbean, I'll just take a step away from the topic a little bit and jump into that. In the Caribbean, you don't go to anyone's house or anybody's home with your two hands swinging. You don't come with your two empty hands swinging at all. You always bring something, right? There's always something little in your pocket, your back pocket, your backpack, your bag, as a gift, right? That's how I was reared. That's what I know. And a lot of the times you would find that there was a lot of bartering happening, even though it was a gift. It's bartering in that people will bring what they have. So many people had access to fresh fish. Many people had access to lobster. It isn't something here you'll have to go to a particular chain restaurant to actually experience some of these seafoods. In the Caribbean, it's there, like 135 square miles surrounded by tropical water. That's what you're going to get. It's everywhere. But everyone didn't have access to it, but it became something that we bartered with. So I remember my godfather always bringing lobster to our home. And it wasn't something my parents had to pay for, or at that time when I was particularly much younger, could afford to buy frequently, right? So he would always bring it to them. I literally could see it now, images of the lobster moving around. It's still in motion. It's gray shell and everything. Yeah, gray shell. But anyway, I digress. But yes, it was definitely considered a symbol of status, and some of the cuts of meat as well considered a symbol of status. So, back to the idea of the low density lipoproteins. When we consume fatty foods, right? And I mean, again, it could be fatty meats, but it can also be coconut oil. That's another one on my list that I wanted you all to, put that in your pipe and smoke it, so to speak. No, don't smoke. But put that in the back of your head, right? That's one of the oils that is being heavily promoted right now as a superfood, as something that's really great for you. I don't have a problem with using coconut oil. I don't have a problem, and I don't think it's a problem at all. The problem is when we begin to separate foods. So we want the oil component without consuming the whole coconut. That's the problem. Because the body is a divine vessel. It is created to reduce and assimilate foods that were meant for us to eat. When we begin to separate them, that's when we pose the problem. That's why something like cholesterol is a, when you think about atherosclerosis and the reason why it develops so much and it's so rampant in our communities, right? In African American communities, it's not because it just shows up when you're 40. It doesn't. It's not because it shows up when you're 50 and you're 60 and then you need to take medication. No. When you actually read and study what is actually happening with this particular issue and how it begins to affect the function of the heart, and it has an effect on the function of the rest of the body, you find that, yeah, that's why we're having stroke so early. That's why we have coronary heart disease as a huge problem in our men. Oh my goodness, it's really, but it's happening because it's long term. It's not because it occurred just for 5 or 10 years you've been eating one way. It is over a long period of time. And as an educator for many years, this is 13 years, I sat down to calculate it the other day. I was like, oh, it's 13 years watching students eat a certain way, right? This is dependent on the environment. It's dependent on whether they're urban children living in urban communities or other communities, right? And children who live in urban communities and would have attended the schools I worked at were what you call the low income, right? So they would receive free school lunches and so on. And that's a whole different kettle of fish to talk about when we talk about the types of foods, right, that are being prepared for youth in public school systems, right? But their choice of food was always the fried foods that were cheaper, and they can buy it at what's called the Chinese spot, right? And again, I'm using those terms because that's the terms that are being used. Those are the terms on the awnings as well. So nobody try to come for me because it's on the awning. That's the label of the food spot. So there's nothing, like you can't say anything about that. But anyway, yeah, and that becomes the easy, quick food that they desire because it's $1, because it's easy to shell out $3. I have time and time again seen them at a very young age walking around with the big styrofoam trays with the high acidic vinegary smell of the ketchup and the fried fries. All right. And you probably say, oh, well, they're young. I hear that all the time. Oh, they're young. Actually, cholesterol buildup begins at that age, right? So if we could, over a long period of time, actually monitor our ingestion of, saturated fats, then it means that it's going to directly affect how our hearts function, how our arteries function, and how clear our arteries are when we become older. All right. And I know it sounds so simple. It's kind of like, well, yeah, like we do that. We didn't need you to tell us that. But the truth is, sometimes we always need someone at the forefront saying it is a long-term effect, right? The buildup, right? When we talk about LDL and bad cholesterol, it's the buildup over time. It's those fatty acids and not fatty acids, fatty pieces of fat actually layering itself inside of underneath a thin layer of the vessels. And what it does, it bulges so that the layers of fat, just the residue just layers and layers and layers, and it sits there. It doesn't move because we're not doing anything to clear or flush it. Nor are we reducing our consumption. So it's just layering and layering. And then it begins to form a ball and it presses against the arteries. When it presses against the arteries, which lead to the heart, of course, the bulge reduces the pathway for the flow of blood. And that reducing of the pathway is what actually leads to the coronary heart disease and there are other arteries that get affected too, not just the arteries that are and the pathways that lead to the heart. When it starts to actually bulge and block other pathways, that's what leads to the stroke, and that's what leads to, you know, some of the other things like kidney failure and poor circulation. So you know, like I felt like it was necessary to highlight the culture of cholesterol because it has become part of our culture. Culture includes food. Our culture includes the way we do things and the way we eat, the way we consume, the way we, you know, feed our temple is directly responsible for a lot of these particular symptoms that we see showing up when we become 50 and 60. All right, it doesn't, it's showing up only because, again, it's layered over time, right? It's layered over time. But Antonio says, right, my jaw dropped when I saw the price of conch shell conch in the States, when you could literally buy it from the side of the road here. I guess the status dependent on how accessible it was. This is true. This is true. But even in the Caribbean, again, certain things like lobster it's more expensive. Not unless you know someone who is, you know, a fisherman or someone who regularly goes out. They may have their regular job. Like my godfather was, yeah, let's not get into what he was, but you know, he had access to that. Like he had access to monkey and other meats that were considered exotic in Grenada and throughout the Caribbean, but would not be considered as a food here. You know, some people are probably saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? But yes, that's correct. It does depend on how accessible it is. Peace, Christopher Magneto. Peace, Brother Chris. Thank you for joining in the space. Stress X, what's on that man's plate on a consistent basis? Yes, yes, indeed. He says it's a silent killer. It is. Oh my goodness. That was a couple minutes ago, so I'm behind, but it speaks to the fact that it creeps up on you. It creeps up on you. It's kind of like a pipe, right? It's kind of like a pipe, and you constantly, you know, pouring oil, right? You know, I grew up in the Caribbean seeing people do that. Like after frying something using oil, they'll pour the oil down the sink, right? Not everybody did. Some people threw it on the soil in a soil patch somewhere outside, which was smart, you know. But of course, that has its own effects. But you would pour it down the sink, and after a while, the film and the layers of oil it clogs the pipe. That's the same thing happening inside your body. The only problem is there is no Drano or Plumber X or whatever to pour down there to get rid of it. There, you know, you have to literally remove certain things from your diet and allow for those layers of residual fat to, you know, remove itself. Christopher says it makes me think of Genesis series, where is the inception for the thought food that produces these types of foods? If you could trace the origin and intent, would you eat it still? Would you? Exactly. 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 You know, sometimes there are protocols that are put in place and we don't even realize it, you know, and the Most High put protocols in place, and we seem to, you know, like we skip over them thinking, okay, well, it's just, you know, I can't eat this thing, but I could eat it and take this medication, is going to help. I'll talk about that in a little later on, because the medication does not help, right? Does it? Well, it does, but the percentage of decrease in risk, or those who are at risk, it really doesn't compare. It doesn't compare. You know, it's selecting particular foods and consuming a certain type of balance of diet that actually helps. All right. Brother Christopher says, why do we eat? Is it to live or living to eat? That's a brilliant question. It's funny. I remember entertaining that particular question decades ago, actually. And I can't remember which. There was a book, or was it with someone else I was having a conversation? I was much younger then, of course, and of course I was looked down at because that was, again, like I shared before, I selected to shift into a plant-based or vegetarian and vegan diet when I was 14. So it was quite new to everyone and weird. So it was just like, you the weird one over there. But yeah, it always comes down to, is it to live? Are you eating to live, or are you um living an existence to engage in the desire for flavor and what you consider juicy, what you consider a good dish. And the truth is, someone told you what to consider a good dish or what a good dish is. Someone told you that. Someone had to build that up in you. I learned from one of the sisters in here, just being in her home and engaging with some of her youth at that time. Like, I remember one time a question came up, like, if your child doesn't know um, the taste of ice cream, they'll never desire it, right? They'll never desire it. I haven't had regular ice cream from since, I can't even tell you when was the last time, right? Because I'll try to make my own, but the reason I'm trying to make my own is because I was introduced to what's considered the standard for ice cream before. And never mind, we made our own, with our little ice churner, the ice can, the ice bucket. Anyway, that's another story. But Antonia says, on the flip side, have you ever experienced or witnessed people who had less cholesterol dense eating habits in your upbringing? That's a good question. And for those of you who are in the chat, I want to actually pose that question to you as well. I do think it's very easy to recall memories of those who did eat or consume, because their lifestyle was heavily, like Brother Chris says, based on living to eat. So it was all about, how delicious this thing was, how fatty it is. The fatty it is, the better. I mean, like, I'm telling you all, I grew up seeing that, hearing that, and participated too, until like, eventually I was, like, I began to challenge and question certain things. But I did grow up, and I'm asking this question to everyone else who's in the audience. Like, drop a sentence or two, or a statement or two in the chat. Let me know, have you witnessed others who had less cholesterol dense lifestyles when it comes to eating? There are a couple of people, I have a couple of aunts, and they're all women. None of them are men. There is all women. They're women because I could hear the mantra right now. They would say, I'm watching my finger. They meant their figure, but it was a joke. It was a kind of joke. I'm watching my finger, so I wouldn't eat too much. And it wasn't for them. Interestingly, it was not just, okay, I'll eat the same foods that everyone else is eating, but I'll just have a smaller portion. No, it was quite, you could see they took time to reflect on which foods were particularly harmful in terms of the fat constitution and, starchy constitution, and they removed those. And they chose to eat fresher, leafier greens, a lot more fruit. Those were their choices. And I have a couple of aunts and women who were family friends who did that. They were very strategic, and they maintained really nice agility, mobility, and size. I don't want to focus on the size and weight and how the person looks physically, but it's also the mental as well, mental capacity, and all of that was in place. Yes, Brother Antonio Monkey. I actually experienced one of those hunts for monkey when I was younger. It was dark night. I was with my father, and there were a couple of other men, and they had these things called bangaret, these long things with Monsanto, like a it's like an oil lantern just made from oil dipped, like a cloth dipped in oil and wrapped around the end of a stick. Anyway, crazy adventures, right? I didn't go too far into the forest, but I was a part of some. They were hunting monkey, my goodness, and you could hear the monkeys, right, in the trees and so on. Brother Antonio says it helps like ginger ale after a night of heavy drinking. All right. Right, right. It damage is done. Brother Christopher says, I haven't seen any brother. I think it creates a weird paradox. You can take advice from unhealthy eating people, but it creates a hard um headed hitting image um in mind because everyone is offering bad advice. Hmm. And the advice and also the modeling is off. Brother Antonio says, at a younger age, it was mainly I eat this way because there's diabetes in the family. There was less I eat this way because it's healthy, and more I eat this way because I don't want to be sick. True, true. You know, yeah, but that's because there wasn't anything to compare it to. I think now there's so much more that we could compare these types of lifestyles to. And we talked a little bit about health and heritage. And when we start looking at the line of our family, the lineage, and like those who end up with coronary heart disease, those who end up with strokes, even though they may not have been fatal, but we know that those are side effects of, just buildup. And I think when you have that hard hitting reality and that imagery, I think this is what Brother Christopher is mentioning. When you have that hard hitting experience happen so close to home, that becomes the trigger for movement. But if you've never seen anyone function because they choose a healthier lifestyle, then it's difficult because you don't have anything to compare it to. All you have is, this is how you eat, this is what's traditional, right? Right. So I'm going to move on. The point I wanted to make, right, after talking about the way the fatty residue kind of builds up in the system and bulges and pushes on the arteries, closing those pathways, it leads to those symptoms that I mentioned before, and those issues, poor circulation and kidney failure, and stroke as well is also a part of it. And I talked about the fact that it accumulates over time. But here's a fact, right? After sifting through a lot of different articles and trying to find a beacon of hope, a light, so to speak, just in terms of, how because I am a firm believer, they use that phrase, but I'm a firm knower that our vessel was meticulously created. So I know that like there are things that happen to us, issues, symptoms, ailments that show up, and we don't realize that our body is already prepared and willing and structured, meticulously structured to actually fight or reverse the issue. All right. All it takes is just knowledge and application. So one fact I wanted to share was that 1 in 40 African Americans have a mutation that is responsible for reducing LDL. It's actually very much present, right? And when I say reducing it from 130 to lower, right? If the thing is, I talked about testing and so on a couple months ago, and that's something that you want to consistently do, right? Run a cholesterol test to see where you are, where your numbers are. You want to make sure it's lower, and below, of course, 130, 102 is good, right? But there are times when I hear, Brother Christopher says every witness, there are times when I hear people have, cholesterol levels of 200 plus. That's a problem. All right. It is a genetic characteristic that actually leads us to identify that African Americans are able to, um, there's this particular gene present that allows them to reduce LDL over time. Again, that's the way the body's naturally wired. The problem becomes, the problem actually begins, when we don't pull back, right, and reduce the amount of fats that we introduce to our bodies. So, and I'll say this, the effect of regulating our cholesterol intake over time is actually 88% more productive in helping to maintain good heart health and reducing the risk of coronary heart disease, right? Versus if we were to ignore those, that type of lifestyle and actually wait until we're 60 and take medication. Because if we wait until we're 60 and take medication, the medication actually helps only 30% of the time, versus 88% of the time. If we were to choose a healthy lifestyle and maintain it, then it means that we will have a complete reduction. Here are some of the unhealthy foods I wanted to point out, because I've been talking for a while now, so I want to jump into unhealthy fats that you ought to move away from. Fatty cuts of meat, full fat dairy products, and I'm speaking to a wide community, right? I'm speaking to those who are whole-based, whole foods, plant-based, those who are meat eaters, those who are non-meat eaters, those who are vegans, vegetarians. It's a mix-up, right? Because it's a timeline or a spectrum, and you have kind of sit on the spectrum and make your choice based on what works for your body and what works for the way you function. Very important. And most importantly, what the laws say about what you should and shouldn't be eating, but again, that goes back to culture and what your culture says about what you should be consuming. All right. Deep fried fast foods, processed foods, cakes, pastries, biscuit. I talked about those in our hidden nemesis, gluten hidden nemesis video from Last Strong. So please jump back on later on and listen to that video. Leave some kind of feedback in the comments, ask questions, challenge me, all of that. Coconut oil and butter are also on that list. So you want to make sure that if you're going to consume them, small portions, right? Very small portions. Coconut oil can be very tempting, but I'm going to say try to get your oils in by eating whole foods. So if you want to make sure you're introducing oils into your body, and as women, if you begin to restrict oils from your diet, you're going to have issues with fertility. So you do not reduce the fats in your body because, oh, I'm going to be skinny. That don't make sense, right? It don't make sense. So be sensible. Instead of consuming oils that pour out of a bottle or butter, you can select things like olives, avocados, coconut, right? Eating coconut naturally, right? Those are important. MCT oil, I feel the same way about primrose oil, right? It's a medicine. It's a medicine. So the thing about a medicine is that you're going to eat it, but you regulate it. I think food is medicine too. However, you're not going to eat one type of thing constantly or all the time without thinking about, how it affects your body if you have too much. So for MCT, I'm going to say, yes, consume it, but make sure that it is reduced. For those who want primrose oil too, that's another oil that you can find in capsule form. It helps women regulate. I'm sorry, my hand on my waist, like I think I'm in grades. It helps to regulate hormones, and for those true foods are meds. Yes, that's right. Thank you, Karen Mother Sill. That's right. Um, but primrose oil, yeah, helps to regulate hormones in the body for women, and it can help to reduce inflammation in the womb as well too. So MCT oil is, I say it's the same. I have the same thoughts about it as I do with primrose. You take it sparingly, and if you know yeah, you take it sparingly. That's the most I'm gonna say. Instead, it's not the type of oil like a canola oil or peanut oil. That's what I'm driving at, right? What I'm driving at. It is not the same as those, like the bottle of oil that you're gonna use to cook with. It is medicinal, so you're taking small portions of it for like a specific ailment or for specific nutrients. All right. So use it, but make sure again that you know purpose. It's not, oh, I'm frying up these mushrooms right now, and I want so bad to mimic chicken, so I'm gonna just that's not how you use it, right? You don't. Same thing with oil of oregano. It's another oil, right? It's an extract, and I'm not always for the extracts, but it's medicinal, right? So you use it sparingly in a way to, again, reverse an ailment or for a nutrient. You're not using it for cooking. You're not using it because it tastes pleasurable and it's good, it's pleasing to the palate. It's not because of that. It's purpose driven. That's the key. It helps regulate my digestive tract. Yeah, I say keep using it, right? But again, you're not pouring out. Same thing with flax oil. I'm not 100% on the flax oil bandwagon. But if you're going to use it because you want the lignans and you want, those omegas, you're going to use it sparingly. You're not pouring it in everything that you make, and pouring it out and heating it. That's not how it's being used. All right. Deep fried foods, stay away from them. Baked goods, stay away from them. Some of the high fat foods, I just spoke about this, natural oils. So I'm not even gonna talk about it because I already explained, my position on oils. If you have to extract and separate coconut oil from the coconut, almond oil from the almond, olive oils from the olive, then you're not really eating a whole food plant-based. You want to make sure that when you eat the whole walnut or you eat the whole almond, you're getting all of the other nutrients, all of the other irons and fibers as well. So the body's actually digesting a whole food and not just a part of it. All right. And I say it's your lifestyle, right? To close off, I'm going to say is the shifting and changing the lifestyle. Do not make pizza and baked goods and those other foods the focus of your meals. Do not make that the way you eat. Do not make a styrofoam tray of fries every day at 3 o'clock when you leave school, or do not make that a habit. Do not make it the main source of nutrients to fuel for your body, because what's going to happen again is the fat layers, and over time you're going to find yourself in a bind. Maybe it's a stroke, maybe it's your doctor says to you, okay, like you run the risk of having heart disease in the next 5 years and you're 55. Yeah, that's a problem, right? And I just wanted to point out before I close really quickly, in Grenada there are an increasing number of deaths, right, of young people who are much younger, passing from coronary heart disease and from strokes that are directly because of that fatty buildup. We have to pay attention to that. So it's not just people who are in their 50s and 60s showing up with high levels of cholesterol. get a cholesterol test, get yourself tested and move accordingly, right? And if you need support, you need help, find yourself, ask your doctor questions, grill them, right? Reach out to me. I'm quite happy to help after you get, like prescriptions or, and when I say prescriptions, I'm not necessarily meaning meds, but just prescriptions based on how to shift and change your lifestyle and you need help implementing those. Please reach out to the Sovereign Eats. We'll be quite happy to help you. For those who are here and hung with us for this time, thank you for being in the space. I will see you all again for our Sovereign Sunday, where we do food demos to help support you to transition. I'll see you again for another midday motivation, because all of October, we're just going to uncover some of these, pesky ailments that show up, and some of the foods and so on that are, we're consuming that have been affecting us, right? Peace, everyone. Peace, peace, peace. Big up to Karen Mother Silk, top tier speakers, Christopher, Magneto, and Naya, and Antonio Smith. Antonio, not Antonio. All right. Peace, you all. Oh, Brother Antonio says, labels tend to box people in and it becomes tempting to fit their chosen label instead of focusing on purpose of the food they eat. Fries are typically vegetarian. Now you're reopening the conversation. This is true. Fries, so is deep fat fried mushrooms. It mimics a food or a piece of chicken that you probably ate, a couple years ago, and you want to recreate that thing. And so you deep fat fry it, and there's no question around, well, why am I dipping, this particularly good whole food inside of, like high heated oil just so that I can mimic something else, Good point. Good point. And I am going to, all right. Peace, you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.